This is Fox 13 News.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, one Mid-South doctor really has taken only 2 days off from work. Just 2 days off for the entire year. Now, really, how many of us can say that we have a commitment to our mission to take just 2 days off for the entire year? Dr. Stephen Threlkeld, you have to know who he is. He's an infectious disease specialist at Baptist Hospital. He's been front and center for the Mid-South since the beginning of the pandemic. Fox 13's Jackie Massey joins us in studio. And Jackie, you spent a day in his shoes.
From the moment Dr. Threlkeld wakes up, he tells me he is thinking about the coronavirus, answering phone calls, treating patients, and doing research. Despite his personal struggles and sacrifices, he always puts others first.
And I remember turning to my wife and daughter saying, your lives are about to change for the worse considerably. I never dreamed it would be for a year.
Just one phone call changed Dr. Steve Threlkeld's life forever. That call in early March 2020 from Baptist Hospital announced the arrival of the coronavirus in Memphis.
Hang in there. Good to see you.
From that moment on, he began working overtime, sometimes 18 hours a day, often arriving at the hospital at 7 a.m. and not leaving until 1 the next morning.
You just had to go as long as you could go and then sleep and come back. And so there wasn't a lot of time for recreation or even sometimes to catch your thoughts.
No time to reflect or even decompress, constantly thinking about COVID-19. He's an infectious disease specialist, so he spends countless hours researching and answering questions. A tough task, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when information was limited.
You have to answer questions for which there may be no clear answer. And so it really comes down to judgment. And when you're making judgment that affects the lives of other people.
But through it all, despite these obstacles, Dr. Threlkeld wakes up with a positive attitude. He makes every moment count, whether it's feeding his dog or answering a quick question about COVID from a family member or friend.
I'm as I describe myself, a pathological optimist. So I think every day is going to be a great day. A lot of times it doesn't work out like that.
He's quick to add he is not an army of one. He works closely with his brother and 4 others on the infectious disease specialist team at Baptist. Co-workers he can lean on for emotional support.
We all go until we all are finished. Is how we do things in our group. And
when he isn't working with his team, you can find him answering questions from reporters 3 times a week.
It's one of the key questions, to be sure.
His second job is to keep the public aware of what's going on in the fight against COVID-19. That has left little time for his family, making moments spent with his wife limited but precious.
And my wife would bring me dinner at the hospital for days on end, and some days that's the only time I saw her. Yeah, it's been really bad. Thankfully, I married very well. It was, marrying my wife was the best thing I ever did. And
Dr. Threlkeld says it's hard feeling sorry for himself when he's seen the ravaging effects of the pandemic. He's lost more than sleep. He's lost friends, even his minister.
But when you had people close in your life get really sick and die, it brings it home in a way that you can't otherwise imagine. There's something about kids losing parents that's the hardest for me, and that happened a few times. I mean,
those are the times when he leans on his faith.
Without it, I just don't see how it's possible not to think that there's some sort of higher purpose behind this and the other suffering that we have, because there was a lot of suffering. There really was.
Dr. Threlkeld believes there is a light at the end of the tunnel. He is thankful for vaccines and is seeing fewer COVID patients. Still, he warns the pandemic is not over yet.
It's a year you can't get back, and you hope you've done something, to be worthwhile during that year to try to help people. But, it's a year where you don't get to see your family much, and everything else was put on hold.
Dr. Threlkeld says once this is all over, he just wants to take a vacation with his family. He says he is thankful for the opportunity to serve his community. In the studio, Jackie Massey, Fox 13 News.
Got to tell you, Dr. Threlkeld is an infectious disease expert that we're lucky to have here in this community. Personally, I used to be a fan of one of his cousins, Richard Threlkeld, who was a famed journalist. Obviously, excellence runs in the family. We're glad to have him here with us.